The call came while I was debugging code at 2 a.m., 3 energy drinks deep into what should have been a simple software patch. Melissa Harper's voice cut through my concentration like a knife through silk. Professional, polished, and carrying news that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my place in my own family. Emma, we need to discuss some changes to Sofia's wedding arrangements, she said. Her tone carefully neutral in that way expensive wedding planners perfect when delivering bad news. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Your family has requested that you not attend the ceremony, but they're hoping you'll still honor the financial commitment we discussed. I stopped typing. The cursor blinked on my screen, waiting for input that would never come. Outside my downtown Phoenix apartment, the city sprawled beneath a blanket of amber lights, but suddenly the world felt very, very small. $80,000. That's what I'd promised my sister for her dream wedding. $80,000 I'd saved from consulting contracts, from working weekends while my friends traveled, from saying no to vacations and yes to every client who needed emergency fixes. Money that represented 3 years of building my business after our father died and left me as the family's unofficial financial anchor. And now they wanted my money, but not me. The whole mess started 6 weeks earlier at Aunt Linda's pool party in Scottsdale. March in Arizona is perfect. Warm enough for swimming, but not yet the brutal heat that drives everyone indoors by May. Linda's backyard was an oasis of artificial grass and desert landscaping, complete with a built-in outdoor kitchen where Uncle Tom was grilling carne asada and pretending he knew what he was doing. I'd driven up from Phoenix after finishing a particularly brutal client project, still wearing my work clothes, but too tired to care. The family gatherings had become more frequent since Dad died, as if we were all trying to prove we could still be a family without the man who used to anchor us together with his terrible dad jokes and his ability to fix anything that broke. Sofia was floating on an inflatable flamingo in the pool. Her long dark hair fanned out like a mermaid's, while her fiancé David sat on the edge, dangling his feet in the water. They looked like something from a lifestyle magazine. Young, beautiful, effortlessly happy in that way that makes you simultaneously proud and envious when it's your little sister living the fairy tale. Mom sat in the shade of the covered patio, nursing a wine cooler and scrolling through her phone with the focused intensity of someone trying to understand technology that keeps changing faster than she can learn it. She looked up when I walked through the sliding glass door, her face lighting up with that particular smile she reserved for moments when all her children were in the same place at the same time. "Mija, you look tired," she said, patting the cushion next to her. "Come sit. Tom's making enough food for an army." I grabbed a Modelo from the cooler and settled beside her, letting the desert breeze carry away some of the stress that had been building in my shoulders for weeks. This was good. This was what Dad would have wanted. His family gathered together, safe and happy and supporting each other through whatever life threw at us. That's when my cousin Jake emerged from the pool like some kind of aquatic messenger of chaos, water streaming from his basketball shorts as he jogged over to grab a towel. "So, Emma, you must be so excited about flying to Cabo for Sofia's wedding. I can't believe she's doing a destination thing, but I guess when you're footing the bill, you get to call the shots, right?" The Modelo bottle suddenly felt very cold in my hand. I looked from Jake to Sofia, who had gone very still on her flamingo float, no longer paddling lazily, but frozen like a deer caught in headlights. "Cabo?" I repeated carefully. Jake's expression shifted from casual to confused to horrified in the space of about 3 seconds. "Oh, shit," he whispered. "Oh, shit, you didn't know." The silence that followed was the kind that makes you aware of every sound. The filter cycling in the pool, a neighbor's dog barking 3 houses over, the sizzle of meat on Tom's grill. Sofia slowly paddled her flamingo toward the shallow end, her eyes fixed on the water as if it might offer her an escape route. "Sofia," I said, my voice sounding strange even to myself. She climbed out of the pool with exaggerated care, taking her time to wring out her hair and adjust her bikini straps. When she finally looked at me, her face carried that particular expression I remembered from childhood, the one she wore when she had broken something valuable and was trying to figure out how to blame it on the cat. She said, "We were going to tell you." Tell me what exactly? David had gotten very interested in examining his fingernails. Mom had set down her wine cooler and was radiating the kind of tension that meant she already knew whatever was coming and had hoped to avoid this conversation entirely. About the change of venue, Sofia continued. Melissa found this incredible resort in Cabo San Lucas. It's right on the beach, and they have these amazing sunset ceremonies, and David's family can fly down easily from LA. And when was this decided? I interrupted. Sofia's rapid-fire explanation faltered. A few weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks, Melissa presented some options, and this one was just perfect. And you didn't think to mention it to the person paying for it? The words came out harsher than I intended, cutting through the family gathering like a blade through silk. Uncle Tom turned from his grill, spatula frozen in mid-flip. Jake backed away slowly, probably wishing he could dive back into the pool and pretend he'd never surfaced. "Emma," Mom said carefully, "we were going to discuss it with you." "When?" Another silence. This one lasted long enough for me to understand that there was no good answer coming. They hadn't planned to discuss it with me because they hadn't planned to invite me. The realization hit like ice water. Not just the venue change, the exclusion. They were planning a destination wedding in Mexico, funded by my money, and I wasn't going to be there. How many people are invited? Sofia wrapped a towel around herself like armor. It's going to be small, intimate, just immediate family and very close friends. How many, Sofia? 40 people, David said quietly, speaking for the first time since Jake's bomb had exploded our peaceful afternoon. 40 people, immediate family and very close friends, and somehow the sister who was paying for the entire celebration hadn't made the cut. I stood up carefully, the way you move when you're not entirely sure you're...
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Will hold you. The Modelo bottle was still cold in my hand, condensation dripping onto the artificial grass beneath my feet. "I need to go," I said. "Emma, wait," Sofia started, but I was already moving toward the sliding glass door. "Mija, don't leave like this," Mom called after me, but her voice carried a note of resignation that told me she'd known this moment would come eventually and had hoped to postpone it indefinitely. I walked through the house without looking back, past the family photos on Linda's mantelpiece, past the shrine to Dad with his military medals and the flag they'd given us at his funeral. My keys felt foreign in my hand as I unlocked my car and sat in the driver's seat, letting the air conditioning blast away the desert heat that had suddenly become suffocating. 40 people at a destination wedding in Cabo? Paid for with my money. And I wasn't one of them. I drove back to Phoenix on autopilot, the familiar route down the 101 freeway passing in a blur of strip malls and housing developments. By the time I reached my apartment complex, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in the kind of brilliant oranges and purples that usually made me grateful to live in Arizona. Tonight, the beauty felt mocking. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it, clean, organized, efficient, the kind of space that belonged to someone who worked too much and lived alone by choice rather than circumstance. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of downtown Phoenix where the lights were starting to twinkle in the gathering darkness. My laptop was still open on the dining room table, the cursor still blinking patiently where I had abandoned it when Melissa called. That conversation felt like it had happened in another lifetime, but it had only been 4 hours ago. 4 hours since I learned my family wanted my money but not my presence. 4 hours since everything I thought I understood about my place in our family structure crumbled like a house of cards. I opened a bottle of wine, not the good stuff I saved for celebrations, but the decent everyday Pinot Grigio that helped take the edge off long workdays. Then I sat on my couch and did something I rarely allowed myself to do. I thought about Dad. He'd been gone 3 years now, long enough that the sharp edge of grief had worn down to a dull ache that lives somewhere behind my ribs. Heart attack at 52, sudden and brutal and completely unfair to a man who'd worked construction for 30 years and never missed one of his daughter's school plays. The funeral had been standing room only. Dad was one of those guys everyone liked, the kind of man who remembered your kids' names and always had jumper cables in his truck when your battery died. After the funeral, when the casserole stopped coming and the sympathy cards stopped arriving, reality had set in. Dad had been the family's financial anchor, and with him gone, that role had fallen to me by default. Not because anyone asked, but because I was the one with the steady income and no kids to support and a savings account that could weather emergencies. It started small. Mom's car needed new tires, and her school secretary salary didn't stretch to cover unexpected expenses. Sofia's student loan payments were crushing her while she finished her teaching degree. Uncle Tom's roofing business went through a slow patch, and suddenly Christmas does. You help when you can, and you don't keep score, and you definitely don't hold it over anyone's head. Dad would have done the same thing, but somewhere along the way, being helpful had transformed into being expected to pay for things. Sofia's car repairs, Mom's medical bills when her insurance didn't cover everything, family dinners at restaurants where I somehow always ended up with a check. It wasn't malicious, I told myself. It was just the natural order of things adjusting to our new reality. When Sofia got engaged 6 months ago, she'd floated the idea of a big wedding with the casual confidence of someone who'd never had to worry about money. David's family is huge, and I want all our friends there, and Mom deserves to see her baby girl do it right, she had said over dinner at our usual Mexican place in Tempe. Weddings are expensive, I'd pointed out gently. I know, but you're doing so well with your business, and David's parents said they'd help with some things, and maybe we could do it in installments? She had looked at me with those huge dark eyes that had been getting her out of trouble since she was 5 years old. That's how I'd ended up promising $80,000 for my sister's dream wedding. Not because I was rich, my software consulting business was successful, but I wasn't exactly rolling in money, but because I loved her and wanted her to be happy and believed that family meant showing up for the people you cared about, especially when they needed you most. The irony wasn't lost on me now. I'd shown up with my wallet, but apparently that was all they wanted from me. My phone buzzed with a text from Sofia. Can we talk? I know you're upset, but there are reasons for the changes that make sense if you let me explain. I stared at the message for a long time, watching the screen dim and brighten as the phone waited for a response. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times, indicating she was typing additional messages, but thinking better of sending them. Finally, another message appeared. The resort has a limit on wedding party size, and we had to make difficult choices. It doesn't mean you're not important to us. A limit on wedding party size. 40 people was the limit, and I hadn't made the cut? My sister, whom I'd supported through college heartbreak and panic attacks and money troubles, had looked at a list of the 40 most important people in her life and decided I wasn't one of them? But my $80,000 was still welcome. I turned my phone face down and poured another glass of wine. Outside my windows, Phoenix glittered like a circuit board, all straight lines and logical connections. Unlike families, apparently, which operated on some kind of chaotic system I'd never quite learned to navigate. The silence in my apartment felt different now. Not peaceful, but hollow. Like the echo of something that used to be there but had been removed so gradually I hadn't noticed until it was gone. I thought I was an essential part of my family's foundation, but it turned out I was just a convenient source of funding with the emotional weight of a credit card. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about destination weddings in Cabo. I imagined Sofia in a flowing white dress on a beach at sunset, David handsome in a linen shirt, 40 of their closest friends and family members celebrating their love while mariachi music played in the background. It would be beautiful and romantic and everything she had ever dreamed of. And I would be in Phoenix,
800 miles away. Having funded a celebration I wasn't invited to attend. The next morning brought 3 missed calls from Mom and a voicemail that started with, "Mija, I know you're hurt, but please call me back so we can work this out." I deleted it without listening to the rest. Instead, I made coffee and opened my laptop and did what I always did when emotions threatened to overwhelm me. I lost myself in code. There's something soothing about debugging software. Problems have logical solutions, and if you're patient and methodical, you can fix almost anything. Unlike families, which seem to operate on principles I had never quite mastered. Around noon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. "Emma, this is Melissa Harper. Do you have a few minutes to talk?"
The wedding planner's voice carried the same professional polish I remembered from our initial consultation. But there was something else underneath it now, a note of discomfort that hadn't been there when she was describing floral arrangements and menu options. "I'm listening," I said. "I wanted to follow up on our conversation yesterday about the venue changes and guest list modifications." Modifications! As if my exclusion from my own sister's wedding was a minor scheduling adjustment. "Your family has asked me to confirm that the financial arrangements we discussed will remain in place despite the changes to the guest list," Melissa continued carefully. "They're hoping you understand that the budget requirements haven't changed even though the celebration will be more intimate." More intimate. 40 people celebrating without the person who was paying for it all? "Let me make sure I understand," I said slowly. "My family wants me to pay $80,000 for a wedding I'm not invited to attend?" A pause. That's a simplified way to put it, but essentially correct. I had to give Melissa credit for honesty. In her world of diplomatic language and careful euphemisms, that was probably as close to, "yes, they're treating you like a walking ATM," as I was going to get. "Did they explain why I'm not invited?" Another pause, longer this time. "They mentioned that the venue has strict capacity limits and difficult decisions had to be made about the guest list." "And I didn't make the cut?" "Emma," Melissa said, and for the first time her professional polish cracked slightly. "I've been doing this for 15 years and I've seen every kind of family drama you can imagine. This situation is unusual." "Unusual how?" "I've never had a client's family member fund an entire wedding and then not attend it. Usually when someone is contributing at this level, they're part of the planning process and definitely part of the celebration." The weight of her words settled around me like a heavy blanket. Even a stranger, a professional whose job was to navigate delicate family situations, recognized how wrong this was. "What would you do?" I asked, "if you were in my position?" Melissa was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful but kind. "I would ask myself whether the people making these decisions deserve the gift I was planning to give them. And I would remember that gift giving should come from love, not obligation." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment looking out at the Phoenix skyline and thinking about gifts and obligations and the difference between the two. For 3 years, I'd been giving my family pieces of myself, my money, my time, my energy, my emotional labor, because I thought that's what family meant. You showed up. You helped. You didn't keep score. But somewhere along the way, my help had become expected rather than appreciated. My generosity had become a given rather than a gift. And now they wanted the most expensive gift of all, while making it clear that my presence was not just unwelcome, it was actively unwanted. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I called my bank and put a hold on the wedding fund. $80,000 that had been earmarked for Sofia's dream celebration suddenly became unavailable, frozen in my account like water turning to ice. Then I opened my laptop and began researching flights to Sedona. If my family wanted to celebrate without me, I could find my own way to mark the occasion. And if they wanted my money, they were going to have to learn to want me too. Sedona in late March is high desert perfection. I drove north from Phoenix early in the morning, watching the landscape transform from urban sprawl to red rock cathedrals that thrust toward an impossibly blue sky. The rental cabin I'd booked was tucked into a canyon just outside town, surrounded by juniper trees and the kind of peace that makes you remember what peace actually sounds like. The property manager, a sun-weathered woman named Carol, met me at the gate with keys and a smile that suggested she'd seen plenty of people arrive here looking like they were fleeing something. "First time in Sedona?" she asked, leading me up a winding stone path. "Yes," I said, which was true enough. I'd lived in Arizona my whole life, but had never made the 2-hour drive north to see what all the fuss was about. "Good timing," Carol said, unlocking the heavy wooden door. "Spring is perfect here. Not too hot, not too crowded. You picked a healing week." The cabin was exactly what I needed without knowing I needed it.
Exposed wooden beams, a stone fireplace, floor-to-ceiling windows that framed Bell Rock like a living painting. The kitchen was simple but well-equipped. The bedroom overlooked a garden of desert plants I couldn't name, and the back deck offered an unobstructed view of red rock formations that had been standing for millions of years before human drama existed and would be standing long after it ceased to matter. I unpacked my single suitcase and tried not to think about the fact that this was supposed to be wedding week. Sophia and David were probably in final preparation mode, confirming RSVPs and doing last-minute fittings, and experiencing the kind of joyful chaos that comes with planning the biggest celebration of your life. Without me, but still expecting my money. My phone had been buzzing intermittently during the drive, but I'd ignored it. Now, settled into the cabin's peaceful isolation, I finally looked at the messages. 7 missed calls from Mom, 4 from Sofia, 2 from Aunt Linda, a string of increasingly frantic texts that range from "please call me back" to "we need to talk about the wedding expenses" to "Emma, you're scaring me." I turned the phone off and slid it into a drawer. That first afternoon, I hiked the Bell Rock Trail, a moderate climb that wound around the base of one of Sedona's most photographed formations. The path was busy with tourists, but something about the immensity of the landscape made individual human problems feel smaller and more manageable.
Brought my camera, a hobby I'd neglected since building my business consumed all my creative energy, and found myself stopping frequently to capture the way light played across ancient stone. At the summit, I sat on a flat boulder and ate the sandwich I'd packed, looking out over a vista that had remained essentially unchanged for millennia. A family with young children was attempting a group photo nearby, the father patiently repositioning everyone while the mother tried to keep a toddler from wandering too close to the edge. They looked happy, exhausted, completely absorbed in the project of documenting their moment together. I took out my own phone, switched it back on long enough to snap a single photo of the view, and posted it to Instagram, without thinking. No caption, no location tag, just red rocks and blue sky and endless space. Then I turned the phone off again before I could see who might respond. The piece lasted exactly 12 hours. I woke the next morning to the sound of gravel crunching in the driveway. Through the bedroom window, I could see a white sedan parked behind my car, and a familiar figure in a floral sundress picking her way carefully up the stone path in shoes that were definitely not designed for hiking. Mom had found me. I pulled on jeans and a sweater and met her on the deck where she stood looking out at the view with an expression I couldn't quite read. She'd aged in the 3 years since Dad died. Not dramatically, but noticeably. More gray in her dark hair, deeper lines around her eyes, a weariness in the way she held her shoulders that spoke of carrying burdens she'd never expected to shoulder alone. "How did you find me?" I asked. She turned, and I saw that she'd been crying recently. Her eyes were puffy, her makeup carefully reapplied, but not quite able to hide the evidence of distress. "You used your credit card to rent this place," she said quietly. "Sophia was panicking about the wedding payments, and we called the bank to see if there was some kind of mistake with the hold you put on the account. They wouldn't give us details, but they confirmed recent transactions, including this rental." I should have paid cash. The thought flitted through my mind along with a dozen others: irritation at the invasion of privacy, admiration for their detective work, resignation that my family's capacity for drama knew no geographical boundaries. "So you drove 2 hours to track me down," I said. "I drove 2 hours to talk to my daughter who disappeared without a word and put a freeze on money that 40 people are depending on for a celebration that's supposed to happen in 5 days. There it was, the real reason for the visit. Not concern for my well-being or curiosity about why I'd left, worry about the money. "Come inside," I said. "We should probably have this conversation sitting down." I made coffee while Mom settled onto the living room couch, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. The morning light streaming through the windows was generous, but it couldn't soften the tension that filled the space between us like smoke. "The venue requires final payment by tomorrow," she said without preamble. "Melissa has been trying to reach you for 2 days. Sophia is beside herself. David's parents are asking questions we don't know how to answer." I handed her a mug and sat in the chair opposite the couch.
Maintaining careful distance. What questions? About whether the wedding is still happening, about whether you're having some kind of breakdown, about whether we should start making backup plans. The coffee was good, rich and strong, the kind that tastes like possibility rather than obligation. I took a slow sip and looked at my mother, really looked at her, trying to see past the anxiety and frustration to the woman who'd raised 2 daughters mostly alone, while Dad worked construction jobs that kept him away from home more often than any of us liked. "I'm not having a breakdown," I said finally. "I'm having a realization." About what? About the difference between being needed and wanted. Mom set down her coffee mug with shaking hands. "Emma, what are you talking about? Of course you're wanted. You're my daughter, Sofia's sister, family." "Am I? Because 40 people are celebrating Sofia's wedding in Cabo, and I'm not one of them. But my $80,000 is still invited." "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple." I kept my voice level, calm, the way I spoke to clients when explaining why their software wasn't working the way they expected. "You want my money. You don't want me. Those are 2 separate things, and it took me 32 years to understand the difference." Mom was crying now, quiet tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand. "After your father died, everything fell apart. The insurance didn't cover as much as we thought it would. Sofia was struggling in school. I was trying to figure out how to pay for everything on a secretary salary. You stepped in and helped, and it was such a relief to know that someone could handle the financial emergencies." "I was happy to help." "I know you were, but somewhere along the way, asking you for help stopped feeling like asking and started feeling like counting on you. Like you were this reliable resource that would always be there when we needed it." It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I was going to get, and it hurt more than outright denial would have. She was admitting that they'd stopped seeing me as a person with my own needs and limitations and started seeing me as a solution to their problems. "And Sofia?" I asked. Mom's face crumpled slightly. "Sofia is 25 years old and in love and planning the biggest day of her life. She wants everything to be perfect. When the venue said 40 people maximum, she made a list of David's huge family and her college friends and the cousins she grew up with, and somehow I got edited out. She didn't mean it like that." "How did she mean it?" Another long pause. "She said you'd understand, that you're not really a wedding person anyway, and you'd probably prefer to contribute financially rather than deal with all the social obligations."
Landed like physical blows. My sister had decided I wouldn't want to attend her wedding. She'd made that choice for me, without asking, based on some version of me that existed only in her imagination, a person who cared more about spreadsheets than celebrations, who would rather write a check than dance at her sister's reception. "Did it occur to anyone to ask me what I wanted?" I said. You thought you knew, but you were wrong." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at red rocks that had weathered millions of years of storms and still stood beautiful and unbroken. I wanted to help plan her dress shopping. I wanted to toast her at the bachelor party. I wanted to walk her down the aisle since Dad can't. I wanted to be her sister, not just her bank account. When I turned back, Mom was sobbing openly, not the careful, controlled tears of someone trying to maintain dignity, but the raw, ugly crying of someone who'd finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. "We can fix this," she whispered. "We can add you to the guest list. There has to be a way." "Can you? Because I called Melissa yesterday. The resort has had this booking for 3 months, 40 people exactly, all arrangements finalized. David's extended family alone takes up 25 spots. Sofia's college friends take up 8 more. That leaves 7 spots for our entire family, and according to the current list, those are you, Sofia, Uncle Tom, Aunt Linda, Jake, and 2 of Sofia's high school friends who apparently made the cut over me." The math was brutal and precise. There was no room for me without displacing someone else, and we both knew Sofia would never ask any of David's family to step aside for her sister. "Then we'll change venues," Mom said desperately. "We'll find somewhere else that can accommodate more people. 5 days before the wedding? With deposits already paid and guests already traveling? Be realistic."
She was quiet for a long time, staring at the coffee growing cold in her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and defeated. So, what happens now? I sat back down and leaned forward, my elbows on my knees, trying to find words for feelings I was still figuring out myself. Now you have a choice, I said. You can keep my money and have your perfect 40-person wedding in Cabo without me, or you can postpone the celebration until you can figure out how to include the person who's paying for it. But you can't have both. Emma, please, Sofia will be devastated. David's parents have already flown in from LA. The vendors are expecting payment. You can't just what? Treat me like a person instead of a checkbook? Include me in decisions that affect me. Ask what I want instead of assuming I don't have feelings about being excluded from my own sister's wedding? The words came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't regret them. For 3 years, I'd been the accommodation, the one who adjusted her expectations and swallowed her hurt feelings and made things easier for everyone else. I was tired of being easy. My phone, forgotten in the kitchen drawer, began ringing. The sound was muffled but persistent. And after the 4th call in 10 minutes, I got up to check it. Melissa Harper's number showed multiple missed calls and several text messages marked urgent. That's probably about the venue payment, Mom said quietly. I looked at the phone, then at my mother, then out at the red rocks that had been standing long before humans invented weddings and family drama, and the particular pain that comes from discovering you're loved for what you provide rather than who you are. I need you to leave, they said gently but firmly. Emma, I need time to think, and I can't do that with you here asking me to make this decision easier for everyone else. You drove up here to secure the money for Sofia's wedding. You've heard what I have to say about that. Now I need you to leave so I can figure out what comes next. She stood slowly, gathering her purse and keys with the careful movements of someone trying to maintain dignity in defeat. At the door, she turned back one more time. I love you. We all love you. I need you to know that. I know you think you do, but love doesn't look like this. After she left, I sat on the deck for a long time, listening to the silence and trying to separate hurt from clarity. The afternoon light shifted across the canyon walls, painting the rocks in shades of gold and copper that no camera could adequately capture. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk circled on thermals, riding the desert wind with effortless grace. My phone kept ringing. I turned it off again and left it in the drawer. That evening, I drove into Sedona proper and had dinner at a small restaurant tucked into a shopping plaza that catered more to locals than tourists. The waitress, a woman about my age with paint under her fingernails and turquoise jewelry that looked handmade, seemed to sense I wasn't in the mood for conversation. She brought me green chili stew and cornbread and left me alone with my thoughts. At the table next to me, a young couple was deep in wedding planning conversation. The woman had a notebook full of color swatches and venue photos, and they were debating the merits of string quartet versus DJ with the intensity of people who believed this decision might determine the success of their entire marriage. They looked happy, excited, completely absorbed in the process of creating a celebration that would include everyone they loved. I paid my check and walked out into the desert night where the stars were so bright they looked fake, like someone had scattered glitter across black velvet. In Phoenix, light pollution washed out all but the most prominent constellations, but here I could see the Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light. The next morning brought a new sound, multiple cars crunching up the gravel drive. Through the window, I could see Sofia's blue Honda, followed by a sedan I didn't recognize. My sister emerged from her car wearing jeans and sneakers and a determined expression I recognized from childhood, the look she got when she'd decided to tackle a problem through sheer force of will. David got out of the passenger seat, tall and lanky, and uncomfortable in the way of people who'd rather be anywhere else. From the sedan came a woman I'd never met, but who had Sofia's dark eyes and David's easy smile. His mother in service, I guessed, pressed into service for this intervention. I met them on the deck before they could knock, coffee mug in hand, and wearing the kind of calm that comes from having slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Sofia, David, Mrs. Chen. It's Linda, David's mother said, extending her hand with genuine warmth. I've heard so much about you, Emma. I was hoping we'd meet under happier circumstances. Sofia looked terrible. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, her usual perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her
Blotchy, with the kind of exhaustion that comes from crying too much and sleeping too little. She looked like someone whose perfect wedding was falling apart 3 days before the ceremony.
We need to talk, she said without preamble. About what? About fixing this, about finding a solution that works for everyone. I gestured toward the outdoor furniture. Have a seat. Can I get anyone coffee? While I busied myself in the kitchen, I could hear hushed conversation from the deck. Sofia's voice, tight with stress. David's lower tones, probably trying to calm her down. Linda Chen's measured responses, the kind that suggested she was trying to understand a situation she'd walked into without full context. When I returned with mugs and a carafe, Sofia was crying again. Quiet, frustrated tears that she wiped away impatiently with the back of her hand. Mom told me what you said yesterday, she began, about feeling like we only want your money and not you. That's an accurate summary. It's not true. I poured coffee and waited. Sometimes silence is more effective than argument. I love you, Sofia continued. You're my sister. You helped raise me after Dad died. You've been there for every major moment of my life. Except this one. The venue has a strict capacity limit, 40 people total. David's family is huge. His parents, 3 siblings, all their spouses and kids. That's already 25 people before we even get to our side. I understand the math. So you know how impossible the choices were. Every person we didn't invite is someone important to us. David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His mother was watching the conversation with the careful attention of someone trying to understand family dynamics that didn't quite make sense. Whose idea was it to not invite me? I asked. Sofia's face crumpled. It wasn't an idea. It was a process of elimination. We listed everyone we absolutely couldn't leave out. And when we got to 40 people, that was it. And I wasn't in the absolutely couldn't leave out category. You were in the would understand and support us anyway category. The honesty was brutal and clarifying. In Sofia's mind, I belonged to a tier of people who could be counted on to sacrifice for her happiness without requiring reciprocal consideration. I was reliable, accommodating, infinitely understanding Emma, who would write a check and smile and never make things difficult by having feelings about being excluded. Mrs. Chen, I said, turning to David's mother, how many people from David's side are attending? Linda looked between Sofia and David, clearly uncomfortable with being pulled into the conversation. 25, she said quietly. And if the venue could only accommodate 30 people instead of 40, would your family give up 10 spots so David's sister-in-law could attend? The question hung in the air like smoke. Linda's face grew thoughtful as she realized what I was really asking. I see, she said after a moment. No, probably not. We'd find a different venue or postpone until we could include everyone important to David. Sofia's tears started fresh. It's too late for that. The deposits are paid. Everyone has made travel arrangements. The vendors are expecting final payment today. From me, I said gently. The vendors are expecting final payment from me. Yes, but I'm not important enough to attend? David finally spoke, his voice careful and measured. Emma, I don't think Sofia meant it like that. I think she was trying to make an impossible situation work, and she made assumptions about what you'd want. Based on what? He looked at Sofia, who was staring at her hands. Based on you being the kind of person who always puts family first, who always finds a way to make things work for everyone else. Even when it doesn't work for me? Even then. The admission settled between us like a stone dropped into still water. David had just confirmed what I had suspected. They'd all become so accustomed to my accommodation that they'd stopped considering whether I might have my own needs and feelings about family celebrations. Mrs. Chen, I said, turning to David's mother, how many people from David's side are attending? Linda looked between Sofia and David, clearly uncomfortable with being pulled into the conversation.
25, she said quietly. And if the venue could only accommodate 30 people instead of 40, would your family give up 10 spots so David's sister-in-law could attend? The question hung in the air like smoke. Linda's face grew thoughtful as she realized what I was really asking. I see, she said after a moment. No, probably not. We'd find a different venue or postpone until we could include everyone important to David. Sofia's tears started fresh. It's too late for that. The deposits are paid, everyone has made travel arrangements, the vendors are expecting final payment today. From me, I said gently. The vendors are expecting final payment from me. Yes, but I'm not important enough to attend? David finally spoke, his voice careful and measured. Emma, I don't think Sofia meant it like that. I think she was trying to make an impossible situation work, and she made assumptions about what you'd want. Based on what? He looked at Sofia, who was staring at her hands. Based on you being the kind of person who always puts family first, who always finds a way to make things work for everyone else. Even when it doesn't work for me. Even then, the admission settled between us like a stone dropped into still water. David had just confirmed what I'd suspected. They'd all become so accustomed to my accommodation that they'd stopped considering whether I might have my own needs and feelings about family celebrations. Mrs. Chen, I said, turning to David's mother, if I may, this sounds like a situation where good intentions led to hurtful outcomes. Sofia, you made assumptions about Emma's feelings without asking her. Emma, you've been so consistently generous that your family took that generosity for granted. She paused. The question now is whether this can be repaired in time for Saturday. How? Sofia asked desperately. The venue won't accommodate more people. We can't uninvite David's family. We can't postpone without losing all the money already spent. I looked at my sister, really looked at my sister, and saw not the confident young woman who'd announced her engagement with such joy, but the scared little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms because she trusted me to keep her safe. She was panicking, overwhelmed by the magnitude of having to choose between her wedding and her sister, between disappointing 40 people or losing $80,000. There is one option, I said slowly. 3 pairs of eyes fixed on me with the intensity of people grabbing for a lifeline. I pay for the wedding as promised. You have your perfect day in Cabo with the 40 people you've chosen to include. And after that, we redefine our relationship. What do you mean? Sofia whispered. I mean, I'm not your backup plan anymore. I'm not the person you call when you need money or help or someone to solve problems. I'm not the family member who can be left out of important events because I'll understand. If you want my financial support in the future, you'll need to include me in the decisions that affect me. If you want me at family gatherings, you'll need to actually want me there, not just tolerate my presence. Sofia was sobbing openly now. I do want you there. I've always wanted you there. But not enough to make room for me when it mattered most. David reached over and took Sofia's hand. What if we found a way to add one more person to the guest list? What if someone from our side stepped back? Who? Linda asked quietly. Your brother's wife? Your college roommate? Your father's business partner who's known you since you were 10? The mathematics of exclusion were relentless. Everyone currently on the list had a valid claim to their spot, and asking any of them to step aside would simply transfer the hurt from me to someone else. This is what I'm offering, I said. I'll honor my commitment to pay for your wedding. You'll have your perfect day in Cabo with everyone you've chosen to include. But this is the last time I solve a family problem that I wasn't included in creating. From now on, if you want my help, You ask for it properly. If you want my money, you explain what it's for and why I should provide it. If you want me at celebrations, you invite me at the same time you invite everyone else. And if we don't, Sofia asked, then you don't.
Get my help, or my money, or my presence at family events where I'm clearly not valued. The silence stretched long enough for a hawk to circle overhead, riding the desert thermals with a kind of effortless grace I was still learning to find in human relationships. Finally, Sofia nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I agree to that." "All of it?" "All of it." I pulled out my phone and called Melissa Harper. The conversation was brief and businesslike. Authorization to proceed with final vendor payments, confirmation of details for a wedding I wouldn't attend, professional courtesy wrapped around personal heartbreak. After I hung up, Linda Chen stood and smoothed her skirt. "I should let you three finish this conversation," she said tactfully. "Sofia, David, I'll be in the car when you're ready." When she was gone, David leaned forward in his chair. "Emma, I want you to know that if I'd understood how the guest list decisions were affecting you, I would have said something. But you didn't understand." "No, I didn't. I'm sorry for that." Sofia was calmer now, exhausted tears replaced by the kind of clarity that comes after a crisis has passed. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now, you get married on Saturday in Cabo San Lucas with 40 of the people you love most in the world. You have a beautiful celebration that you'll remember for the rest of your life. And I stay here and figure out what it means to be a sister who's valued for who she is instead of what she provides. Will you forgive me?" I considered the question seriously. Forgiveness wasn't a switch I could flip or a decision I could make in the moment. It was a process, something that would happen gradually as we learned to navigate this new version of our relationship. "I'll try," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. They can't." Sofia nodded slowly. "I know." After they left, I sat on the deck watching the light change on the canyon walls and thinking about beginnings and endings and the space in between where real change happens. My phone buzzed with messages of gratitude from Sofia, from Mom, from Melissa Harper, confirming that all payments had been processed successfully. But I didn't feel grateful or generous or satisfied with my choice. I felt empty, like something essential had been carved out of me and the healing hadn't yet begun. That afternoon, I hiked Cathedral Rock, a challenging climb that required scrambling over red stone that had been worn smooth by millions of years of wind and weather. At the summit, I sat on a narrow ledge and looked out over the entire Sedona Valley spread below me like a living map of beauty and possibility. I took a photo, not for social media this time, but for myself. A reminder of this moment, this view, this feeling of having climbed something difficult and found solid ground on the other side. Saturday morning, I woke early and made coffee and sat on the deck watching the sun paint the rocks in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere in Mexico, my sister was probably having her hair done for her wedding, surrounded by friends and family who would dance at her reception and toast her happiness and celebrate her love story. I wasn't there, but for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for making this possible, Linda Chin." And then another from Sofia. "I love you. I hope someday you'll believe that." I turned off the phone and finished my coffee as the desert came alive around me. Birds calling from hidden places, insects humming in the warming air, the whisper of wind through ancient stone. Later that morning, I packed my things and drove back to Phoenix, where my apartment waited with its city views and efficient spaces and the quiet satisfaction of a life built on my own terms. There were client projects waiting, code to debug, problems to solve that had clear solutions and logical outcomes. But I didn't go straight home. Instead, I stopped at a small gallery in central Phoenix that featured local artists, where I bought a photograph of red rocks at sunset.
Not Cathedral Rock or Bell Rock or any of the famous formations that appeared on postcards, but a smaller, nameless piece of stone caught in perfect light. I hung it in my living room where I could see it from the kitchen table where I worked. A reminder of this weekend, I learned the difference between being needed and being valued, between family obligation and family love, between solving problems for people who took me for granted and building a life where my presence was actually wanted. The wedding, according to Sofia's Instagram posts over the following days, was exactly what she dreamed of. Sunset ceremony on the beach, mariachi music during cocktails, David handsome in linen, and Sofia radiant and flowing white against an ocean backdrop. 40 people who loved them, celebrating under a perfect Mexican sky. It looked beautiful. It looked joyful. It looked like everything a wedding should be. And for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't responsible for making it happen, managing the details, or ensuring everyone else's happiness at the expense of my own. I was learning what it felt like to be whole.